Good overnight and welcome on in for another episode of From Day One. As said, the overnight edition with Dr. Dennis McKenna and the immortal Art Bell. So without further ado, let's get back to their interview on psychedelic research where the lines were open.
Parenterally is the term, other than by mouth. You can snort it, and there's a whole ethnopharmacology of snuffs in South America, DMT-containing snuffs, or you can take it in combination with another plant that contains a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, another set of compounds that will knock out those gut enzymes. Then it becomes orally active. And that's the secret of ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is a combination of two plants, one of which contains DMT, and the other contains another group of alkaloids called beta-carbolines that knock out MAO in the gut. So they protect the DMT. It's absorbed unchanged. It makes it to the brain unchanged. And then it's, instead of 15 minutes or so, when you take it parenterally, when you snort it or inject it, it's very, very short. But instead of that, it's 4 to 6 or 7 hours.
Wow.
So it's stretched out. It's not as intense as when you take DMT, parenterally, say, but you get more out of it. It's more relatable because you spend more time there, and you can learn more about what this state, this dimension, or whatever, what it's all about.
Do you really feel that it is possibly another dimension?
Well, like I say, I don't think we can dismiss it, I don't think we can dismiss that possibility that somehow, because we don't really understand what the mind is, right? We know that the mind has physical roots in the brain. It has a connection to physical substrates, but then it also seems to have elements that are not physical, maybe extra-dimensional, hyperdimensional, or so on.
Yes, sir.
And maybe they do tap into some extra-dimensional realm. I mean, this is where, to approach these questions scientifically is difficult. I don't think science can really say at this point one way or the other, but I think it's possible. So it's possible. Okay. And certainly subjectively it seems so. And if you talk to indigenous people, people who use ayahuasca as part of their ethnomedicine,
right?
For them, this reality is it's just accepted. Unless of course, this is the way it is. You see how it is. This is how we experience it. They don't really get into these, debates about whether it's real or whether it's not. These are, in some ways, these notions are the product of Cartesian dualism and the whole, scientific philosophical tradition of the Western mind. To indigenous people, these things are not separate. There really is no in or out, the self is not separate from the nature that they're surrounded in. They experience the world quite differently, I think, than we do. For one thing, they don't have a point of view, and in indigenous cultures. And the point of view is what separates us from nature. And this is a problem. I think that one thing the psychedelics are doing as we see things like ayahuasca suddenly go global, in a sense, everybody's excited about ayahuasca. It's all over the world. People are using it, I think it's trying to reconnect us with nature. If you could, say that.
You can say that. You can put it that way. Let's go to Skype. Michelle, you're on the air.
Oh, hi, Art.
Hi.
I don't have a microphone, so I hope I'm close enough. Can you hear me?
Yes. The key is find the little round hole in your laptop, if that's what it is.
Yeah.
And get real close.
Okay, it's an iMac. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I hear you. Go ahead.
Clear.
Okay, clear. Okay, I was in Peru, and I did an ayahuasca retreat, and I ran into Peter Gorm on the boardwalk down there in Iquitos in Peru. And I think Art knows Peter Gorm. He's had him on his show.
Mm-hmm. Peter Gorm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyways, he told me that before tourists started arriving in Peru, ayahuasca's main use with the natives down there was it was to get rid and eliminate bacteria and worms that they would have in their systems from living in the jungle, and that the hallucinations were actually a side effect. It actually didn't have a spiritual. They didn't have a spiritual purpose for it. This didn't start to happen until tourists started to come and they started to make money down there. And then the money is what sort of transformed the whole use of ayahuasca into this, psychedelic sort of a spiritual mind trip. Because this is what Westerners were into, and this is how, they could make money for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So now in the presently in Peru, there's all kinds of so-called, what do they call themselves? Maestros?
Maestros, ayahuasqueros, curanderos, shamans,
and a lot of them are self-made, understandably, because they can make an easy dollar, and there's big money in it, and they need money down there, eh?
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, I was pretty modest about it because, I have enough of my own hallucinations, you could say, on Earth to deal with it. And I didn't need to get all screwed up with a whole bunch of ayahuasca. But anyways, I found it very enlightening, and it creates sort of an energetic feeling in you that you could get, say, in a 10-day Vipassana sit. Okay, something you actually have to work hard for to bring yourself into the same sort of sensitive mind space that ayahuasca takes you to.
Mm-hmm.
Say?
Yep.
But the effects were very short-lived. It might last, and you get the insights for 2 or 3 weeks, but you don't really get that deep, profound physiological sort of transformation you get with long-term meditation sitting.
Okay. That's fair comment, or a question, actually. And what do you think, Doctor?
Well, I think she's touched on a number of interesting points. It's true that with the ayahuasca tourism situation down in Iquitos and other places, they're clearly transforming the tradition. The tradition was very different before the tourism started. Mm-hmm. It was not simply used to treat parasites. That was a use of these plants for a long time. But if you look at indigenous groups that use ayahuasca, they do, in fact, have spiritual traditions around this. It's part of their cosmology. It's part of their belief system. I'm surprised that Peter would say that, that he would dismiss all that, because I know Peter quite well, and he knows better. He knows that there are spiritual traditions, indigenous traditions that use ayahuasca. Now, they don't necessarily work for Westerners, right? Westerners are looking for something else. And ayahuasca, as it's used in the tourism circuit, has evolved into this kind of new age-ish, thing that emphasizes spirituality and self-discovery and all that a little bit more than it does in the indigenous traditions. Basically, I don't have a problem with that. I think that's fine. What's wrong with self-discovery and that sort of thing? I don't see anything wrong with it. The fact is that the human's relationship with ayahuasca is a coevolutionary process. We've been in relationship with it for probably thousands of years. This continues, and it's going to change. And as it goes global, and as these indigenous cultures encounter other global cultures, it's going to be transformed. I don't necessarily feel that this is a bad thing. I think it's inevitable, for one thing. And I think that ayahuasca is bringing insights and healing to a lot of people on a global scale. And I think that, as a people and as a culture, we need a healing. We're a deeply wounded culture. We're a deeply conflicted culture.
Mm-hmm.
Much of that has to do with our alienation from nature. I think that one of the things ayahuasca's, one of its strongest messages that many people get is we have to rethink this understanding. We have to realize we're not separate from nature. We're part of it. Until we get that global shift in consciousness, which ayahuasca is trying to catalyze, I think that we're not going to be able to deal with the problems that we face. And as we have to read the news to realize how quickly this global environmental crisis is accelerating. So we're in a heap of trouble, right? Whatever, deep doo-doo, and we have to change consciousness globally. And I think that this is partly what ayahuasca is trying to catalyze. Now, I think that somebody who goes to Peru, probably without studying very much about what ayahuasca is about, and that's what I infer from this young woman, that she didn't really do much homework. She just kind of went down there.
Doctor, I'm sorry. I've got a break here.
Okay.
We've got about 2 minutes, and we'll be right back. This is Midnight in the Desert.
Midnight in the Desert spans the world. To call us from outside the U.S. and Canada only, use Skype with a headset mic if on a computer and call MITD 55. That's MITD 55.
Actually, a very rare opportunity to speak with Dennis McKenna, Dr. Dennis McKenna. We're talking about psychedelic drugs, DMT, ayahuasca, and more. So if you have questions, comments, they are welcome. I've got a question from Zach. Art, is the first-time caller line good every night or just occasionally? Thanks, enjoying the show. Actually, every night. Anytime you're a first-time caller, let me give you the number, all right? I know it's hard to get through. So area code 775-285-5800. If you're a first-time caller only, area code 775-285-5800. And we'd be more than happy to accommodate you. Once again, Doctor, welcome back.
Thank you. Could I just kind of say something about what we were just talking about from the previous questioner, caller?
Yes.
I just want to complete the thought. I think that people who think ayahuasca and these sorts of psychedelics, but maybe particularly ayahuasca, people who think that it's a shortcut don't quite understand the way it's used, right? I mean, it is a difficult medicine to learn to use properly. There's a lot of training that goes into it if you want to become an ayahuasca, or you have to diet with other plants. You have to go through a whole process. So it's not without discipline. And, it's not like it's a replacement for, or it's an easier path than these other paths like meditation and so on. It is its own path and should be respected and treated that way. It's not, it's not a substitute for other paths. It is its own path, and it requires quite a lot of dedication and discipline to learn to use it. I mean, the indigenous people have the idea, this is their model, that these things are plant teachers. They call them teachers, plantas que enseñan, plants that teach. And I think this is more or less correct. When you work with some of these medicines, you're basically forming a relationship with it. Mm-hmm. And, it may present itself as an intelligent entity that is not you, that's fine, or it might, but you're choosing to enter into a dialogue with something that is, that is a teacher in some sense.
One way to put it.
I mean, I've been taking it for 40 years and I'm still learning from it. So it has a lot to teach.
Okay. With that in mind, Ressa, I believe it is, or Rita, is that correct?
Yes, it's Rita.
Okay, Rita.
Oh, okay. It's not about the drug, but it's one of the things that we are hoping to discover through the drug or in various other ways, whether in fact we exist or our entity or soul exists on the death of the body. And so I thought you might be interested in what happened with my children because of that. They absolutely adored my father, and when he died, they were just inconsolable. My daughter particularly was suffering terribly, and she was losing a lot of weight. I was terribly concerned about her. And then one day, this would be about 2 months after my father died, I had handed her her laundry to put away, and she went into her bedroom, and as she walked through the bedroom door, I heard her say, "Mom!" She didn't sound frightened, just stunned. So my husband and I raced to her bedroom. She didn't have to say a word. Her room was flooded with this French aftershave that he had always used, and I never have known anyone else to use
Okay,
it.
I understand. So in other words, proof of the other side. I totally get it. And so, Doctor, that's right. Whether the relief comes from French aftershave that you recognize, and therefore your mind puts together the fact that that's Granddad, and I am so comforted, I feel so much better. Whether it comes from something like that, or one of these drugs that would suggest to somebody there is something else. Either way, the resulting answer is about the same, right?
Right. I mean, this is a phenomenon. This is something that she experienced, so I don't discount that, and I don't say it proves that your grandfather was hanging around, or I say that it was a phenomenon. You probably have heard of the UFO researcher J. Allen Hynek.
Yes, of course.
I guess he's gone, but he was very famous in his day. But he said something he was very well known for his UFO investigations. And he said something one day that really struck me. He said, "I don't know if UFOs are real, but what I do know is the UFO experience is real." And that's a key difference. And so the things that we experience, like on psychedelics, like these paranormal phenomena, these anomalous phenomena, people experience them. Whether the mind makes them up or not is open to question.
It may be even immaterial. It may be immaterial. In other words, if it results in the comfort that she described.
Right.
Okay.
This is part of the reality that we inhabit, and we have to remember a good deal of the reality that we inhabit is our brains synthesizing this hallucination that we're living in, this movie that we're inhabiting. And that's not to dismiss it. That's just to say this is our existential situation.
Okay, let's go to Stockton, California on the phone, and say you're on the air with the doctor. Hi.
Hey, this is Benny from Stockton, California. How's it going, guys?
It's going well, thank you.
Can you hear me well?
I hear you fine. Go ahead.
All right. First of all, I want to say it's an honor talking to you, Dennis. I am 24, but luckily I came across your brother's, studies when I was 19, and been intrigued ever since. And I'm just a little confused still on one thing. The singularity, I know it's kind of really, I mean, it's probably the most complex thing he actually did, but, looked into, I should say. But you've been knocking these questions out in a nutshell remarkably, so if you can just touch on that.
The singularity?
Yes.
As Terence discussed it around the time wave theory, or the idea of singularity as such?
I guess the idea of the singularity as such, would be.
Oh, yeah. Well, the singularity in physics is a concept, and it's in physics the singular. This gets into space-time physics and black holes and this sort of thing. But if you have a black hole, it's essentially, there's an event horizon. There's a so-called event horizon. Within the event horizon is the singularity. And the singularity is just a word for saying that physics cannot say anything about what's going on in there. It's opaque to observation. It's opaque to measurement. So it's the singularity. They may as well say it's the black box. I mean, that's essentially what they're saying. We don't know what is going on in that realm. The laws of physics don't apply. So we can't say very little about it. On the other hand, the fact that we don't know what's going on in there means that almost anything could be
possible. Yes,
right, and that's what's fascinating about it. And when it comes to the mind and consciousness and all this, I mean, I don't know. I have a model that I like. I don't know if it applies or it has scientific validity, but black holes are something that happens, and singularities are something that happens when you get a certain critical amount of mass compressed into a small enough area. Right, then it distorts space-time, and space-time essentially wraps itself around it. Even light can't escape. Then you get a singularity. But maybe an analogy is, I sometimes speculated, the brain is the most complex object in the universe. And maybe when you get enough complexity stuffed together into a small enough area, like the cranium, maybe you get some kind of a singularity, a biological singularity of some kind. I mean, this is totally wild speculation, but I like the idea. So I don't know.
As a physician, you really have to walk a fine line, don't you?
You do, right? You definitely do.
I hear you going right down that line.
Well, otherwise they'd say I was nuts.
Yes,
right?
they would.
Right.
They would, and don't rule it out. All right, let's go to Lipska. Is that right, on Skype?
Yes.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Okay, you're not very loud, so you're going to have to get closer to your microphone or something.
Is this better?
Can you get... Well, I don't know. What are you on?
I'm on Skype on a smartphone.
Okay, all right. Are you using Bluetooth?
No.
Okay, well, go ahead.
I'll try to be as loud as I can. I'll take my answer off the air.
Okay, sure.
I wanted to know the doctor's opinion. Are people who sniff things like spray paint, would that have the same effect as psychedelic drugs?
No, afraid not.
That's going to be an easy answer. Gee.
Yeah, no, you're not going to get the same effect. Those things. Psychedelic drugs interact specifically with serotonin receptors, sometimes other receptors in the body. The solvents, the inhalants, those sorts of things, they're non-specific. They don't interact with any receptors. What they essentially do is dissolve nerve membranes. They totally disorganize it. And, as a result, your neurotransmission is screwed up. These things should not be taken. These are quite harmful.
Yes.
To the liver, among other things.
All kinds.
I don't recommend that. That's not the way to go for altered states. There are much better ways to go.
More ways than one. Oh, my. Okay, first-time caller line. You're on the air with Dr. McKenna. Hello. First-time caller line going once, going twice, gone like the wind. Hello there on the phone line. You're on the air.
Hi, can you hear me?
I hear you.
Great. Thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome.
Doctor, I have one question for you. Throughout the show tonight, you have mentioned several times about basically personification of DMT and ayahuasca and once of psilocybin. Now, my question to you, doctor, is do you believe that there's a spirit or some sort of intelligence
All right,
behind these things?
Yeah, here we're headed down that line again.
Right. Well, yeah, and I'm headed down the same line where I'm going to hedge my bets. I mean, again, I think people do experience these things, and they experience them as being real. I have done that, and most people who have had psychedelic experiences have done that. But what do you mean by real? That's the problem. See, because we live in this.
I think he was asking whether you're encountering an intelligence,
which appears not to be you. That's right.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
But is it real? Well, as I say, you experience it as real. So, for practical purposes, the rest is just sort of metaphysical, nitpicking in some ways. I mean, it's for perhaps it's not useful in a certain way to speculate on this, but it's always good to keep your mind open to say, maybe what I'm experiencing is a piece of myself.
Listen, I know it is difficult. I know it is difficult for you, doctor, to speculate on this, but it is inevitably the first question somebody back from this experience is asking themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's remarkable how similar some of these alien or entity encounters are.
Yes.
I mean, there is a whole universe, a whole phenomenology of pantheon of these things, if you like.
Yes.
I mean, if people aren't familiar with it, I suggest they click into this interesting website called DMT Nexus. I think it's dmtnexus.com.
Okay.
It's fairly heavily science. There's a lot of ethnobotany, a lot of chemistry, and so on. But there are active conversations about this very topic, and I mean, ranging from people who say, well, it's not real, to people who say, well, not only is it real, but we need to open an embassy in Hyperspace. I mean, they're
an
on
embassy.
that side. So,
all right. Okay, let's go to Lorain, Ohio, I believe. Hello.
Hello, Art.
Yes, hi.
Hey, this is Matt. Thanks for having me on. This is another iconic evening.
It is you're a first-time caller, right?
I am, indeed.
Okay. Glad to have you. What's up?
Big time fan. I have a question for Dennis. I've been experimenting with a number of these substances that you've been speaking about tonight for a little over 15 years, specifically around live music experiences. I'm wondering what kind of insight you can, if you talk to people, what experience you have as to what is going on some of these stages, because I've seen the machines, I've seen all kinds of madness. I'm a student of it, and I'm just wondering what your insight is about that scene. Thank you.
So he's talking about the live music stages and that sort of thing. I mean, there is there are, I'm surprised to see this because I didn't really know it, but apparently there is a whole genre of music that is related to DMT. And there is a subculture around this. To be honest, I'm not that involved in this. I mean, I'm kind of outside that. Too old, but it is active, and actually I'd like to plug somebody else's book here, which just about to come out.
How unusual.
It's by a gentleman named Graham St. John, and it's called Mystery School in Hyperspace, The Cultural History of DMT. And I read it. He asked me to write the foreword for it, and I did. And it's a very interesting book. I suggest he get it. It talks about all of these, the kind of movements in art and music and the way that DMT has really influenced our culture, and there's more than you might think. I mean, that's what surprised me. It actually has been around since the 50s and in the culture in some ways, and it's having an effect. And now, of course, its effect is accelerating because people are more aware of it and there's a lot of interest in it. So it's a great book, Mystery School in Hyperspace. I think it's just about to come out, if not already out.
All right, well, consider it plugged.
Yeah.
Hi there, you're on the air with Dennis.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi. I was asking a question about methamphetamine. In 1983, I kind of went crazy and used methamphetamines from April to September, practically daily, and was thinking about addiction to it. When I decided to quit, I just cold turkey quit. Never used it. I haven't used it since.
All right, well, that is interesting, and perhaps the doctor who has studied this sort of thing can explain this. Most people get hooked on something like meth. They're hooked, and that's all there is to it. But there are occasionally people who can just decide to stop something, and without effort and without apparent consequence, they just stop. Doctor?
Well, that's right. I mean, again, here you're looking at the biochemistry of individuality in a certain sense. Everybody is a biochemically unique individual, and the way they respond to drugs of all kinds is determined by what's called their pharmacogenetics. It's a big word, which basically is, the part of your genome that's involved with metabolizing drugs and toxins. That's your pharmacogenetics. And everybody, some people can use something like heroin or nicotine or methamphetamine and fairly regularly and not really get addicted, and other people, one or two exposures and they're quite hooked. So there's a big psychological element to this, and there's also a biochemical determinant, and it comes down to this. She just may be one of these people that is not particularly prone to addiction, and she took the drug and had the drug, but never became hooked. I mean, this is not unheard of. This goes on.
I do understand that. I'm just amazed. I mean, I'm hooked on nicotine. I smoked all my adult life. I've now quit, and I'm still hooked on nicotine. I've got to chew, or I've got a patch. I've got to have a little lozenge or something. I've got to have nicotine. So in my wildest imagination, I can't imagine people get hooked and then just walk away, just sort of without consequence.
It's all about your sensitivity to these things.
I guess so.
Right? Like I was a long-term smoker for a long time. I smoked a pipe, so maybe I wasn't so prone to it. But one day, I just basically quit. And I never really smoked it regularly. But the thing is, for me, when I get into a situation where people are smoking, I'll bum a cigarette, I'll smoke cigarettes. When I walk away from that, I don't have any craving. So I'm one of these people that I can do it, but I don't get hooked. Knock on wood, right? I mean, hopefully this will continue, but I seem to be not really, I can enjoy it, and yet I'm not dependent on it.
To me, that just describes how different we really are. Let's go to our first-time caller line. You're on the air. Hello.
Hello?
Yes, hi.
Oh, Art.
Yes.
Yeah. Listen, you just mentioned the ear-brain connection modeling reality for you. That absolutely is a medical science proven fact. I mean, it's called psychoacoustics. And it was, if you, for example, if you have something, a sound in monaural coming at you, and there's two speakers set in stereo separated, and you delay one speaker by like a millisecond, the speaker disappears. I mean, it's far acoustically. You see the meters move, but nothing's coming out. And what happens is the sound on your other ear is intensified. This is so that if somebody's like throwing a rock or something's coming at you, you get some sort of survival protection of some kind in signaling. That's what they feel. There's a lot of these events. So modeling of reality is scientifically sound. Now, the question is, when you take something that creates distortion, is it, connecting you to some new receivers, or is it just fooling with the modulation?
Yes.
But it's absolute sound.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, but that's absolutely right. I mean, it's a rule of thumb in science, that if you have a system and you want to understand how it works, one thing you can do is you can muck with it. You can do something that interferes with the way it works. You could look at it this way. And by making it go off track, like, for example, maybe taking a psychedelic is to interfere with normal functions, normal consciousness. But by seeing what happens when you perturb that system in ways that you didn't before, you can understand things about how it works. And that's a common way to investigate phenomena. That's why these drugs are so powerful for really understanding consciousness. Essentially, it's if you look at Franz Vollenweider's work in Zurich, he's one of our Hefter researchers and really a star in the field. He really uses psychedelics, especially psilocybin, in his patients, to study basically neuroscience. How do we perceive lights and sounds and other types of input, and how do we take all that and synthesize it into something coherent? Which we experience. This is what the brain does. It takes the raw data of experience, it mixes it with internal processing and associations and all this. Somehow it extrudes, you can think of it that way, it extrudes this thing called consciousness. And consciousness makes sense. Consciousness is something that we're immersed in, and it makes sense to us most of the time. And this is what the brain does. And so we can use psychedelics to study, well, what if we, inject that, put this drug into the mix? How does that change it? And what can we learn from that? So it's interesting also that the caller mentioned psychoacoustics, because now people are working with like sound meditation and this kind of thing, using acoustics in conjunction with psychedelics to cause profoundly altered states that can really give some insights into, the limits of consciousness, how the brain works, also used in healing and that sort of thing.
Right, okay. Has there been any scientific evidence that acoustics in combination with psychedelics light up even further or different sections of the brain? It's a good question.
Yes, and there is scientific evidence. If you look at the EEGs of people who are, having these types of sound therapy experiences, they're quite remarkable. I mean, I'm not qualified to interpret them, but they're pretty amazing. These are quite anomalous, electrical brain states that these things cause. So that's a whole area, and it's interesting that, it goes back to really pretty ancient technologies. I mean, indigenous people, ancient civilization, and all this stuff have often known they've known of a long time of the power of sound, in combination with some of these things, or just by themselves. They can certainly induce altered states. So that's a whole area that is fascinating and is just beginning to emerge.
All right. Professor, hold on a moment, and we'll get back to you. We're coming up on a break, so let me use the opportunity to say our public number is area code 952-225-5278. That's 952-225-5278, the first-time caller line. is area code 775-285-5800. Did you get that? I did forget to mention it. I brought this up, I think, during a open line show and then forgot to mention it again. But we do have it. Area code 775-285-5800. And with that, my guest is Dr. Dennis McKenna. We're talking about a pretty sensitive subject. Now, if you want to join in, got a comment, got a question, here we are.
Strike 12, and Midnight in the Desert is pounding packets your way on the Dark Matter Digital Network. To call the show, please direct your finger digits to dial 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952-CALL ART.
Here's kind of an interesting comment from an ER nurse in Arizona. She says, as a nurse, I really thought I was not going to enjoy the show, but I must say it's very interesting. Let's say the same. Good evening, morning, or afternoon, whatever it is, wherever you are. Dr. Dennis McKenna is my guest, and we are discussing those drugs. those drugs. Hello there. You're on the air with Dr. McKenna.
Hi, Art. Hi, Dennis. I was wondering, my question was concerning nitrous oxide. It seems to be making a big comeback lately, and some people, some of my friends, consider it a psychedelic in some ways, and it can seem to enhance the effects of psychedelics. I was wondering why you thought that was, why you think it's so addictive, and what do you think about the current government regulations and controls over it?
Doctor? Well, we may or may not get any input from the doctor. Are you there, Dennis? Dennis McKenna? He doesn't seem to be there, or we've lost connection with him, caller, so I'm not sure what to tell you. He's still here. I believe he's still here. It might just be away from the microphone or something. I don't know. Dr. McKenna. Aging Dr. McKenna. Dr. McKenna, I'm going to disconnect and try calling you back. We apparently have some sort of, well, I can't call him back. All right, you know what? If I can't call him back, then we might as well go ahead and do essentially open lines. We're in a situation where I guess I keep hearing kind of thing where the connection between us has dissolved, and there is Dr. McKenna. Well, you may be in luck. Hello, Dr. McKenna.
Yes.
What happened?
Hear me now?
Yes.
I don't know. We dropped the signal somehow. Well, that's Skype for you.
Yeah.
But here we are.
Did you hear the question, perchance?
Could you repeat it?
The caller could. Hello, caller? Hello, caller? Are you still there?
They've given up.
Yeah, I guess they've given up. Let's go to the next caller. I think
Sorry about that.
That's all right. That's quite all right. It happens. New Haven, Connecticut. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing great.
Hey. Listen, I kind of just broke into your show a minute or two ago, and I hear you talking about the psychedelics. I'm 42 years old. Back in my early 20s, I used to partake in some psychedelics. I used to take a thing called mescaline.
Oh, yes. Yes. Mushrooms, yes.
Peyote.
No, it was a little tiny pill. Some people called it a microdot, and the other people called it mescaline. I don't know what the difference is.
No.
But I was able to, and quite frankly, some of my friends, the guys that I the friends that I hung out with, that when we would take these, they would have some people, they just laughed and had a good time. I found out that by taking this drug, for lack of a better phrase, I could actually hear other people's thoughts. Does that make any sense at all?
Yes, it does. In other words, you thought you were hearing other people's thoughts. My question would be, did you prove that you could hear other people's thoughts?
I actually did. I thought I was hearing other people's thoughts, and I thought I was going out of my mind. So I went to there was a few people around, and I went to my friend, who also was on the same thing, and I put my back to his back.
Yes.
And I was able to see what he was seeing, and he could see what I was seeing. And I confirmed this by asking him verbally, "What are you looking at right now?" And he said, "I'm looking at the street lights." But the street lights were not facing him. He was facing a house, and I was looking at the house.
Well, these things happen.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they do happen on psychedelics. That's part of what makes them fascinating. Now, what's happened? Why do we have an echo here?
I don't know. I haven't changed a thing here.
I have not either, but I'm hearing an echo.
I wonder if you're still on the, perhaps you changed away from the microphone on your headset.
Yeah, I'm checking that now. Input, output.
That would be my guess.
It looks like it's inputting, outputting the right way.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, that's Skype for you. You know what? We might have the caller back. That first-time caller. Are you there?
Hi, yes.
Okay, good.
Hi, Dennis. I'm glad I had a chance to speak with you. I have a question concerning nitrous oxide, and it has been making a big comeback lately, and also some people consider it to be very similar to a psychedelic, and it can be used to enhance the effect of a psychedelic in many cases. And I'm wondering, why does it do that, and why is it so addictive as far as people just liking to do it so much, and why does it, what do you think about the current government regulations and controls over it? Should they be the way that they are, or loosen?
I remember the question now, and I don't know what I'm going to do about this echo, but anyway, it's not really addictive. People like to do it, right? That's different. So people like to do it. It's not really addictive. And it's not really a psychedelic either. It works by a completely different mechanism, but it does seem to enhance the effects of psychedelics. Some people say it does. Probably part of it is it causes hypoxia. It causes a lack of oxygen in the brain. And if you hold your breath, that will induce an altered state. So that's part of it. It's the psychedelic plus the hypoxia. And people say it enhances it. I've never found that it made much difference, but I haven't experimented with it a lot. Medically, it's a medically used gas. It's important. I mean, it's used in dentistry, right? It's used as a kind of anesthetic. So it's a medically regulated product. And in that sense, it's government regulated, but, it's freely available. I think it's fairly harmless.
He also asked about what you're feeling about the continued illegality of it.
Well, I wasn't aware it was illegal. Is nitrous oxide illegal?
Caller?
So, hello, yes.
Yes.
It is.
Yes. It's more difficult to obtain than heroin in some places.
Yeah. Well, like everything else, like I said before, I don't really think prohibition is a solution. I think that, there's millions of substances out there which alter a state. So, I think that people need to be educated how to use these substances. And if you choose to use nitrous oxide, yeah, I can think of a lot worse choices in that sense.
I suppose.
I mean, it's not so bad compared to other things, methamphetamine, heroin, these sorts of things.
Why do you think the government, just sort of as a question here, took virtually all drugs, or most drugs, and made them illegal, with a couple of notable exceptions: tobacco, coffee, and alcohol?
Well, it didn't happen overnight. I mean, it happened really sort of from the start of the end of the 19th century. It happened because there were all these drugs like cocaine and opiates mostly that were getting incorporated into what amounted to nostrums, home remedies, like home remedies. People could buy tincture of opium. They could buy remedies for sleep that contained opium. They could buy things that contained cocaine, coca wine, all this stuff. So these drugs are fairly hard to, they're easy to abuse, right? They're easy to get hooked on. So there was alarm that people were getting hooked on these. So that was really the genesis of the FDA at the beginning of the 19th century. Was an attempt to, first regulate and eventually prohibit these things. So it evolved over time. The worst instance was prohibition, was a good example. And if we didn't learn our lesson from that, then, we tried to prohibit alcohol, which probably is one of the worst drugs. It's very, very dangerous, very bad for you. Didn't work, right? So they repealed prohibition. They didn't repeal the prohibition on some of these other substances, but that's obviously not working either. So I don't know. We, as a culture, we have a very, sort of uncomfortable relationship with these drugs. And in our culture, there's too much effort. I mean, I tell my students sometimes, to shock them, I say, there's no such thing as a bad drug, right? And that's true, because it's not the drugs that are bad, it's the way they're used, right? So that's where that comes down to human behavior. That comes bad. There's lots of bad ways to use drugs, right? But there's no such thing as a bad drug. The badness inheres in the way people use them.
You could take that exact argument, transfer it to guns.
Well, yeah, there's no such thing. I mean, guns in themselves are not inherently bad, but
how they're used.
Certainly use them in bad ways. I mean, if you're talking about a moral dimension, I think, with respect to drugs, guns, all these things, moral dimension applies to human behavior, right? So this is what we have to look at if we're going to invoke morality. Is it moral to take drugs, or is it moral to use firearms, or in what situation? Is there a moral way to use firearms, a moral way to use drugs? Yes, probably. Lots of not so positive ways to use them, but it all comes down to human behavior. This is what we've got to focus on, not the prohibition of the drug or the gun. Ultimately, that's not going to work.
All right, there's a lot of people waiting for you.
Use these things. They're dangerous.
Doctor, a lot of people want to talk to you. New Haven, Connecticut, very quickly for Dr. McKenna.
Hey, I'm back. I'm sorry. Somehow my phone got cut off.
Okay. And your question is?
It was the question. It was a statement I was asking about if it made sense that we were able to, I was able to see what he was seeing. He was able to see what I was seeing.
Okay. Well, that got answered.
All I can tell you
now,
is
to go along with that, there was a gentleman, CIA agent, who they were back in the 60s. They were doing experiments. The CIA was doing experiments on their own people.
MK Ultra.
Yep. MK Ultra. Right.
So, okay.
They say he committed suicide, but they found that he had a bump on the head.
Mm-hmm.
And you know the story I'm talking about?
Yes, I think we do.
Yeah, there are several stories. Yeah, I mean, the CIA, well, as we were talking about a moment ago, talk about the immoral use of psychedelic drugs.
There would be one.
They were pretty much immoral, you know. I mean, they were using it for mind control or whatever, but the immoral part really was that they were giving these drugs to people without their knowledge, which I think is
very immoral.
Really immoral, actually.
Okay, Anchorage, Alaska, you're on the air with Dr. McKenna.
Yeah, Art?
Yes.
All right, first of all, thank you very much for your show. It's a wonderful show, and I'd like to make a statement, pose a question. And my statement is, this reminds me of a movie that used to be called Altered States, which was done by deprivation and drugs. But when you mention chemical compounds, my mind goes to the structure of atomic structures, the nucleus, and breaking through whole new dimensions. So my mind can't wrap around, if you walk this out, where it goes, because you seem to be implying chemical connections to the wonders of it all. So my question to you is this, that earlier you mentioned that you've been doing this for 4 years, and I wonder if it's appropriate.
40 years.
40 years, caller. 40 years.
Yes, 4 years. Can you?
No, caller. 40 years. 40.
Oh, 40. I'm sorry.
40.
Well, if it's appropriate, can you explain to us your doses and how often you've taken it and your mission so that we might understand? I'm not sure this is the appropriate thing to ask you, but you're such a great communicator. Maybe you could share with us your journey to understand what it is and why you're doing it. Now, get off it. Great show, Art.
All right, thank you.
Well, thanks. No, I'm not going to go into details, really. I just, it would be boring to most people. All I'll say is that I have learned from psychedelic drugs a lot. I have been involved with them for over 40 years, and I've learned, you know, again, in the model that these things are teachers, right? Plant teachers. I guess my major teachers have been mushrooms and ayahuasca. And more lately, it's been ayahuasca. But, you know, how a person uses them, how often, I mean, everybody's relationship with these things is different, right? Just like everybody's, you know, you have a friendship with a person and it's not the same that I might have with that same person. So it's unique, you know, and all I can say is I feel like I've learned from them. And, you know, I'm grateful for that. And, you know, if there's a take-home lesson, people say, well, you've been taking these things for 40 years. What have you learned? And the truth is, what I've learned is that we don't know much. You know, I don't know much. Nobody knows much. And so that's a kind of, I mean, you'd think you'd have more to say, but that's my take-home lesson. Be humble about how little you really know about this world, about this universe, and it's a marvelous place, and we only understand a very tiny part of it. So that's what drugs have taught me.
Doctor, and that's a great place to end it because we have to end it. The show is ending. So,
all right.
Anything you want to plug it down.
Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss, my book. It's on Amazon.com, or it's from the website of the same name. I have a lot of these books, so please buy one if you're interested in my story. Thanks, Art, for being such a great host. We barely scratched the surface, so I hope you'll have me back one of these days.
I will. Doctor, thank you so very much.
Appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Have a great night. Indeed, Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss. What a great title. My Life with Terence McKenna. Dennis McKenna, Dr. Dennis McKenna was our guest, and what a great show. So, listen, everybody, thank you. We'll do it again tomorrow. And for those left on the line, I'm sorry we didn't get to you, but there's almost, well, not almost. There just is not enough time in a show to get to everybody. So I'm sorry you got left in the lurch. Good night.
That was Dr. Dennis McKenna and the Immortal Art Bell, Midnight in the Desert, from October 12th, 2015. And that will bring a close to us here today on From Day One as well. Please like, share, and subscribe. Get us to the goal of 50,000 views, 1,000 subscribers. So Boxy over next year sends us those nice packages we can send off to you. And of course, YouTube puts us on the algorithms and makes us a, force to be reckoned with. CoinBase, Ibotta, and Gain.gg, of course, are always available anytime, day or night. Get your freebies from them and help the show out at the same time. Till next time, merci beaucoup. Thank you for liking, watching, and of course, OCB always here. And release the Krakens as we march along from day one. Have a great night and enjoy your night's rest.